Hello, audience. My name is Dalton Mortimer, and I am the Authenticator. And welcome back to A Mystic's Vlogs, a show where we take a relatively serious look at media with explicit supernatural or fantastical elements through a magical, mystical, mythological, folkloric, paranormal, or occultic lens. And on this week's Legend of Tomorrow, nothing happens! Nothing! Nothing. So, no. Nothing whatsoever happens. So, I am not wasting my time. We are making this as short as possible. It's not even getting the dignity of being a full episode. Fuck this episode. Nothing happens in it. What am I supposed to do with this? I ask you. You asked me to review a thing. What am I supposed to do with the thing? I don't know. Apologies for going spontaneously French there for a second, but fuck me running, this episode had nothing. Nothing, I swear to God. And it left me wanting to throw running skunks in a general direction, if you know what I'm saying. So, yeah, this makes sense now. Last week's episode had all of the bollocks in it, so this week's episode has no bollocks with which to do anything with. And also, while I'm here, I'd like to apologize for a slight misnumbering of last week's title, considering that it was episode 2 I was reviewing in last week's episode, and not episode 3. But I'm not even going to give the episode number on this one, because nothing happens in it. Yes, there's some interpersonal bollocks. I mean, you have Ray accessing his inner punk, and you have Johnny dealing with some mommy and daddy issues, but from a mystical perspective, no, I got nothing. There's like a brief rant I can do about shapeshifters, and then I have absolutely bollocks to do. So this is gonna be like 5 minutes long, and I don't even fucking care. Fuck it. Actually, since this one is gonna be doomed to be short anyway, let's use it to do a little housekeeping, shall we? Because for one thing, this gives us a perfect opportunity to cover one of the weird flukes of this series. Namely, that despite whatever it does to the flow of the series, I'm going to keep my analysis to shows that cover mystical elements only when they cover mystical elements. For example, if I was to cover Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I would cover the season that focused on Ghost Rider and the Darkhold, and specifically the portion of that season what focused on Ghost Rider and the Darkhold. Not any of the other episodes of that season where the Darkhold doesn't make an explicit appearance, or some effect of the Darkhold doesn't make an explicit appearance, and not any previous episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And if I was to eventually get around to covering old shows, and I was asked to cover something like Ben 10, for example, I would cover episodes like Lucky Girl, Tough Luck, Don't Drink That Water, What Little Girls Are Made Of, and so on and so forth. Only the magic-based ones. I would not and will not be giving even the minorest of fucks about portions of shows where magic doesn't make an explicit appearance. Like, for example, when I get around to covering the new Twilight Zone series, and I will, because it's the Twilight Zone, and damn, if I wasn't covering it, what the fuck would I even be doing? I will be focusing on the episodes that have explicit magical content to cover, and leaving some of the more sci-fi heavy ones that feature aliens and shit out for the most part. That's how the cookie crumbles. That's why this show is called A Mystic Vlogs. Hopefully no one has a problem with that, as I made it clear earlier on, and I'm now just making it slightly more clear. And while we're engaged in the public service announcement channel update portion of the program, I probably should also apologize once again, because I know this came out long before my Castlevania Season 2 reviews, or my Chilling Adventures of Sabrina reviews. And yeah, I'm sorry, the Castlevania episodes are just taking a little bit longer because there's a lot of magic to cover, and some of it is fairly complex, and a lot of it I have to explain because it's high magical shit, and I have to go into mathematical realism, Neoplatonism, Pythagorean sacred geometry, and that sort of thing, especially when covering the operations of how Dracula's castle does that thing where it moves. Yeah, I know exactly how it does it, and I'm just having difficulty finding coherency and the words in which to explain it. in terms that aren't going to make people's heads explode with terminology. Anyway, yeah, so this will be out probably long before either of those are, and I apologize, but they are in the offer. Just give me a little bit. The reason why this came out first is because it's short. The reason why last week's Legends of Tomorrow came out before any of those is because that one pissed me off. So clearly, my work ethic has its quirks. Moving on. Alright, public service announcement over. Moving on. Okay, for what little I have to talk about this week, let's go into some of the interpersonal bullshit quickly. Okay, so like I said, Ray has some punk phase that he needs to endear himself to that makes him kind of look like a dark-haired version of Fred from Scooby-Doo. Well, a other dark-haired version of Fred from Scooby-Doo, considering Robert E. Arnell pretty much has that on lock already. And Johnny Boy has some daddy issues where he finds out that because he's in the 70s, he can go see his mother dearest, and tries to kick his father in the bollocks before he's born, but because, temporal logic, which he should know about, despite being a mystic, because logic is the domain of all areas of study, not just science, but whatever. I'm fairly certain he's explained temporal logic and temporal causality on multiple occasions before in various different media, but he's angry at his daddy, so he gets a pet. I can't be bothered to give a fuck is what the issue is. And Nate and Gary have their little quasi bromance at the Time Bureau, and they do the annoying thing that I hate where they can pull any Deus Ex Machina out of their ass they want to and call it magic because there's a prehistoric flower that's man-eating in some form but has no, fairy pedigree or African spiritual thing or anything to go off of, so they just pull the Deus Ex Machina out of their ass because reasons. Unless it's going to be revealed to be the result of some kind of nature spirit or something, that would work. The spoiler alert, the monster of the week is a shapeshifter, and there's a brief and comedic interlude where Johnny sees a redheaded Irish person in the band they're following, because this obviously focuses on the punk movement of the 70s and 80s, and thinks that it's a leprechaun, and they use the method of spilling grains in front of him to make him stoop to count them, and it's not a leprechaun, so that's... Although the guy who is in the band knows enough about fairy lore to be offended by this, which, okay, good on you, random punk person from the 70s, you get some lore credit there. Although, on this subject, that would have also worked on the fairy godmother last week, because it applies to all fairies, but the fuck... You didn't bother to get Puritanism right last week, so why would you bother to get fairy lore right last week either? God damn it, last week's episode was so fucking stupid. Anyway, and yeah, there's barely anything mystical to cover here other than my brief rant that I have on shapeshifters, and then we can move on to next week, where they revealed that it's going to be Swamp Thing related, and I'm curious if they'll actually bother introducing proper Swamp Thing. If they do, I'm going to just slow clap. They will have earned the slow clap if they introduce Swamp Thing next week. I rather doubt it, but fuck it. If they introduce Swamp Thing, I will forgive them the two just kind of abysmal and forgettable episode that they've had these last few days. Yeah, I will totally forgive it if they introduce Swamp Thing next time. I doubt it, but fuck it. And yes, I'm rambling, but hey, I have nothing to talk about, and there's nothing expertise oriented that I need to ramble about. So this is what happens when I don't have anything to say, and I have to record a video. So yeah. And with that, I guess, on with the one and only rant that I'm going to be doing this episode, which is the rant on shapeshifters. and then nothing else, because fuck you. Okay, if we're gonna talk shapeshifters, and we are, because I am determined to make something of this absolute nothing that I have been handed, we need to talk about it in two main vectors. There's spirits that qualify as shapeshifters, and then there is shapeshifting magic. Because, believe it or not, the term shapeshifter is sort of a broad and generic description, considering that there are many spirits that are known specifically for their ability to alter between a animalistic or even plant state and a humanoid state. And you could very well make the argument for all spirits being loosely like that, because of course, spirits being primarily energy beings of various different dimensions don't have a physical form and therefore forge themselves into one for the sake of interacting with those of us that do. Um, every culture pretty much has um, a shape-shifting type spirit. Usually they're nature guardians of some type. For example, dryads and nymphs would be the nature-based equivalent, and spirits like the Wendigo and even debatably Sasquatch would be the animalistic one. And then, of course, you have various different practices in various different cultures that are meant to bring out your primal energy. See, most what you would call shapeshifting, most low level shapeshifting at any rate, is primarily an energy shift, basically a glamour. You get in touch with or alter your own energy in some way by either coating yourself with or accessing the part of your energy that is already primal and animalistic. That's where you get things like the quote unquote animal spirit. It's the part of your energy that is like unto an animal, because of course we've been around a bit, us humans, and the bits of us that resemble a dog or a cat or a bird of prey are still very much like unto a dog or a cat or a bird of prey, but they are very simple because basically the longer you're around, the more complex your energies get, and therefore the more layers you're working with. Um, or perhaps more accurately, the more complexities in your energy will striate themselves and become pronounced. Because, of course, you don't grow any new layers of energy, they just sort of chisel themselves out as your soul or your spirit go through processes. But the stuff that's still there, the baser stuff you start with, the primal stuff, is still there. And with various different kinds of spell work and shamanism, you can access it. And if you bring out that energy and bolster it enough, you'll essentially end up with what's called a glamour. People around you will process the energy before they process you, and that will filter how they perceive you. That's how glamours work, generally speaking. Put a way that some of my more sci-fi oriented friends might understand, you are doing with your energy exactly what the Enterprise does with its shields. From an outsider's perspective, your mystical shields are up. You're just using mystical energy as opposed to electromagnetic energy. Or, to put a different way, you're doing exactly what a perception filter does. You're creating the mystical equivalent of a hologram, and if you do it well enough, their minds, the part of them that processes the energy, will be tricked into thinking that you have actually transformed into an animal. Or into whatever else you're glamoring if you use glamours a lot. I don't, because they're hard to maintain and a pain in the ass. But more on that in a second. Because, for what little magic there actually was in this episode, they did at least manage to get something right. The shapeshifter, when talking about how she shapeshifts, talk about how she has to essentially mimic them on a thought and energetic level, which is something that's true for glamours and for this kind of shamanism in general. You have to get in touch with the part of you that is already like them in some way. So good on you, you got one right. Granted, it was maybe 1 out of 2 mystical elements in the entire goddamn episode, so I still had nothing to work with here. But hey, at least the one you tried, you got right, as opposed to last week, the one you tried was utterly abysmal bollocks, so, 1 out of however many ain't bad. But with that, I think I've covered enough shapeshifting lore for the time being. Though if you have questions or want to know more, just leave me a comment. I never get those for some reason. Feel free to ask me to go into more detail. I would love to. But anyway, let's move on with the rest of the episode, which shouldn't take us very long. Although, hey, looks like we might actually manage to make a reasonable episode length out of this with the combination of the public service announcement portion and this slightly longer than normal lore portion. Yay. The only two really worthwhile other things to talk about are basically the shapeshifter takes on the form of Imara that she got from a photograph, and that was an excuse, very obviously and apparently, to bring that actress back. And Johnny refers to placing a binding spell on the shapeshifter so that she's trapped in a single form as a mystical lobotomy, which is the single stupidest way I think I've ever heard a binding spell described. Johnny, sometimes you are a thick prat, sir. Jesus Christ. And, yeah, that's basically the episode. Like I said, nothing happened. This was very obviously a part 1 to simply reintroduce the actress who plays Imara, and yeah, fuck you, show. Fuck you for wasting more of my time than I care to have wasted. And on that note, I guess I will tell you all to wait for the next Mystic Conjunction, and I will see you all next time. Cheers, everyone!